I can't be sure of the release date for most Cassette Vision games, but there are a few that I'm positive on. And that's because when the Cassette Vision launched on July 30th, 1981, there were 2 games. Okay, maybe 3 games, because the 2 games that I know for sure were launch titles are games 1 and 3, but those 2 for sure. And the flagship for that launch was Yosaku, or Kikori no Yosaku. It has both titles on the cartridge and box. It's a strange first game for the Cassette Vision because it sets up a pattern that the system is going to follow. It's an unauthorized port of an effectively lost arcade game that happens to have quite a bit of historical significance. Yosaku gets its title from a 1978 song by Saburo Kitajima. Kitajima's song has the cadence of Japanese folk music, and it's about a woodcutter and his wife. The arcade game Yosaku was the first video game designed and published by New Japan Planning. If you haven't heard of them before, you might know them by the name that they changed to, SNK. And if that wasn't enough, the technical work on it was done by a company called Orca. Orca went out of business in the early 80s, but that technical staff took their knowledge and started a new company, Toa Kikaku. And if that's tickling your memory a little bit, it's because they also changed their name, and Kikaku means plan. Yes, they really did that. While it appears that not many machines were around, Yosaku gained a reputation among the early Japanese arcade enthusiasts as something you had to play. And because in the late 70s and early 80s, the entire games industry was built on ripping off everyone else, it wasn't even a year before there were multiple games using Yosaku as part of the title. As for SNK's version, well, there's a reason I've been using footage of the Cassette Vision version. While a handful of SNK's Yosaku arcade machines still exist, none of them have ever had their ROMs successfully dumped. In fact, this footage that I'm taking from the YouTube channel Higene Kodo is the only footage of the game I could find where I could be pretty confident it was the original game and not a clone. Something that you'll note about Yosaku is that the song that plays when you start a life is a few bars from that popular song Yosaku. SNK went through the hoops of licensing the music. It doesn't appear that Epoch did any licensing for this game at all. Your goal in Yosaku is to chop down a pair of trees. If you can do that, then you advance to the next stage where everything is faster. You can control the game with either side of the Cassette Vision, but there's no 2-player alternating. And if you're weird enough to push the levers in opposite directions, then nothing happens. The controls in the game are just the lever at the bottom and the 2 buttons. You move left and right on the plane, buttons 1 and 3 swing your axe, and buttons 2 and 4 make you jump. Jumping wasn't in the original Yosaku arcade game. You have to be very precisely lined up with the tree in order to chop it, and it takes 7 swings to knock out that side. Both sides of the tree have to be chopped before it goes down. And as you're doing this, you're getting attacked by a bunch of forest creatures. Birds are swooping around and pooping on you, and all you can do about that is get out of the way. Pine cones are falling out of the trees to smack you on the head. Snakes are crawling out of the ground. And then there are the boars. The boars emerge from the edge of the screen and run in a straight line. And you can do 2 things about them. You can jump over them, which when they're going slow is easier said than done, or you can hit them with your axe, which I've managed to successfully do twice. The timing is impossibly tight on those axe swings. If you jump, you only have to really jump over its head, and that is always going to be your better option. In the original arcade game, you could only swing your axe. Jumping is something introduced for the Cassette Vision version. If you chop down both trees, and there are no enemies on the screen, then you advance and the game speeds up. And since this is a score attack, you just repeat until you lose. There are 6 different game modes that you rotate through by hitting the select button. The default one is the slowest speed and gives you 7 lives. Then there's 5 lives and a little bit faster. Then 3 lives and a pretty quick speed. And this is roughly the equivalent of the original arcade game. The other 3 modes only have one stage and give you infinite lives. Here, the score counter is going up, and it stops once you chop down both trees. These game modes are even faster, and Mode 2-3 is about the fastest speed of the arcade game, which was itself notoriously difficult, because once you reached that speed, it was impossible to play. If there's one thing that bothers me in Yosaku, it's that when you die, is that first you have to listen to a piece of music, then you watch yourself fly to heaven with another piece of music, and then you listen through another piece of music before you start your next life. It takes way too long to get back into the game after you get hurt. For a long time, the Cassette Vision Yosaku was the only home port of Yosaku the arcade game, even if it was unofficial. And that made it the flagship title for the Cassette Vision, the one game that the system is really known for. SNK did eventually create a new version of Yosaku as a hidden mini-game for the Neo Geo Pocket Color game, The King of Fighters Battle Day Paradise, and you had to put that game into an original black and white Neo Geo Pocket in order to play it. But that version is currently on sale as part of the Neo Geo Pocket Color Selection Volume 2. So I'm going to go ahead and spoil the next 10 days of videos here, and tell you that my conclusions for all of them are going to be very similar. I can't recommend that anybody chase one of these games down to play it, but that's not reasonable when you have to get actual hardware that doesn't even interface with modern televisions. Playing the games is rough because the console itself gives you terrible controls, and the games themselves are pretty much made out of rough edges. While I was playing Yosaku, I was desperately wishing for more responsive controls. That I didn't have to use the precision of a surgeon to chop a tree or hit a boar. And when the game was moving at higher speeds, I didn't like how there were often inevitable deaths. I'm making these videos not because I think people are going to want to rush out and play these games, but because I think they're historically interesting. And Yosaku has quite the story behind it.